The autumn afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Windsor Castle, casting long shadows across the ornate carpet of the blue drawing room. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood before an antique mirror, carefully adjusting the delicate sapphire tiara that had belonged to Princess Diana. Today marked the 10th anniversary of her marriage to William, and the royal family was preparing for a private celebration that would later become a public nightmare. The tiara caught the light beautifully, its precious stones sparkling like captured starlight against Catherine's chestnut hair. She had always felt a deep connection to Diana's jewelry, understanding the weight of history and expectation that came with wearing pieces that once graced the beloved people's princess. Today felt especially significant, as William had specifically requested she wear this particular tiara for their anniversary photos. Queen Camilla entered the room with her usual measured pace, her pearl necklace clicking softly with each step. As the current queen consort, she carried herself with the dignity her position demanded, though those who knew her well could detect the subtle tensions that still existed within the family dynamics. Her relationship with Catherine had always been cordial but complex, layered with the unspoken understanding that they both loved the same man in different ways. "Catherine, darling," Camilla said, her voice warm but carrying an undertone that suggested this was not merely a social visit. "You look absolutely radiant. That tiara suits you perfectly." Catherine smiled, turning from the mirror to face her stepmother-in-law. "Thank you, Camilla. William thought it would be appropriate for today's photographs. It feels quite special to wear something of Diana's on our anniversary." On go. A flicker of something crossed Camilla's face at the mention of Diana's name. Even after all these years, the shadow of William's mother seemed to linger in unexpected moments. Camilla had worked tirelessly to carve out her own place in the royal family. But Diana's memory remained a powerful presence, especially in moments like these. "Yes, well," Camilla said, moving closer to Catherine. "I'm sure she would have been pleased to see it worn with such grace." She paused, studying the tiara more closely. "Though I must say, I've been meaning to discuss something rather important with you, about some of the jewelry arrangements." Catherine's brow furrowed slightly. "Oh? Is there something wrong?" "Not wrong, exactly," Camilla replied, her fingers fidgeting with her own rings. "It's more a matter of protocol and, well, timing. You see, there's been some discussion among the senior members of the family about the appropriate occasions for wearing certain pieces." The room suddenly felt smaller, the afternoon light seeming less warm. Catherine had learned to read the subtle language of royal communication, and something in Camilla's tone suggested this conversation was heading in an uncomfortable direction. "I'm not sure I understand," Catherine said carefully. "This tiara was given to me by William. Surely there's no issue with wearing it for our anniversary celebration?" Camilla moved even closer, her eyes fixed on the sparkling diadem. "The thing is, my dear, there are certain protocols about when and how Diana's pieces should be displayed. The king has been quite specific about maintaining appropriate reverence for her memory, and there's concern that frequent public wearing of her most recognizable pieces might send the wrong message." Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. "William specifically asked me to wear this today. He wanted the photographers to capture it for the anniversary portraits." "I'm sure he did," Camilla said, her voice taking on a slightly sharper edge. "But William doesn't always consider the broader implications of these decisions. The king feels that perhaps some of Diana's more iconic pieces should be reserved for only the most significant state occasions." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor outside. Both women turned toward the door, knowing that the family was gathering for the pre-dinner photographs that would mark the beginning of their anniversary celebration. "Perhaps," Camilla continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, "it would be better if you chose something else for today's festivities. Something that doesn't carry quite so much historical weight." Catherine's hand instinctively moved to touch the tiara, feeling the cool metal and smooth stones beneath her fingers. "Camilla, I appreciate your concern about protocol, but William and I discussed this thoroughly. This was his grandmother's wish when she passed the tiara to him, that it would be worn by his wife on special occasions." "I mean, yes, but times have changed," Camilla said, taking another step closer. The monarchy has evolved, and we must be mindful of how our choices reflect on the institution as a whole. The footsteps in the corridor grew louder, and Catherine could hear the familiar sound of William's voice discussing something with one of the palace staff. Her heart began to race, not from excitement at seeing her husband, but from the growing tension of this unexpected confrontation. "I think there may be some misunderstanding," Catherine said, her voice remaining steady despite her growing discomfort. "The king has never mentioned any concerns about this tiara to William or myself." Camilla's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Sometimes the king's wishes are communicated through various channels, my dear. As his wife, I'm often asked to handle more delicate family matters." The implication hung in the air between them like a challenge. Catherine realized this was not really about protocol or royal tradition. This was about something deeper. Something that had been simmering beneath the surface of their relationship for years. "I see," Catherine said, her voice cooling to match Camilla's. "And you're suggesting that I remove Diana's tiara on my anniversary because it makes you uncomfortable?" The directness of the question seemed to catch Camilla off guard for a moment, but she quickly recovered her composure. "I'm suggesting that we all have responsibilities to the crown that sometimes require personal sacrifices. Surely you understand that." William's voice was getting closer now, and Catherine could hear him thanking someone for their assistance with the evening's arrangements. In just a few moments, he would enter the room, expecting to find his wife ready for their anniversary celebration, wearing the tiara that connected her to his mother's legacy. "This tiara stays where it is," Catherine said firmly. "If the king has concerns, he can address them with William directly. I won't be removing my late mother-in-law's jewelry based on second-hand messages delivered moments before our anniversary photographs." Camilla's face flushed slightly, a rare crack in her usual composed demeanor. "Catherine, you're being rather naive about how these things work. Sometimes, directness isn't the royal way. Sometimes we must read between the lines." "Then perhaps it's time for clearer communication," Catherine replied. "I've always believed that honesty serves the monarchy better than whispered suggestions and implied demands." The tension in the room had reached a breaking point. Camilla stood just inches away from Catherine. Both women locked in a silent battle of wills that represented years of unspoken friction. The tiara seemed to sparkle more intensely in the charged atmosphere, as if Diana's spirit was somehow present, watching this confrontation between the two women who had loved her son. "I really must insist," Camilla said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper as William's footsteps approached the door. "This is not appropriate for today." Without warning, Camilla reached forward, her hands moving toward the delicate tiara perched on Catherine's head. Catherine's eyes widened in shock as she realized what was happening, but the moment was so unexpected, so brazen, that she froze for a crucial second. Camilla's fingers found the tiara's setting points, and with a swift, deliberate motion that spoke of absolute determination, she began to lift it from Catherine's carefully styled hair. The sapphires caught the light one last time as they were displaced, and Catherine felt the cool metal sliding away from her head. "What are you doing?" Catherine whispered, her voice filled with disbelief and growing anger. But it was too late. The tiara was in Camilla's hands, and at that exact moment, the drawing room door swung open to reveal William, dressed in his formal attire for the evening's celebration, a warm smile on his face that immediately froze as he took in the scene before him. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity, broken only by the soft ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece and the distant sound of palace staff preparing for the evening's festivities. William stood in the doorway, his expression transforming from joy to confusion to something much darker as he processed what he was witnessing. His wife stood before the mirror, her hair slightly disheveled from the removal of the tiara, her face pale with shock and anger. His stepmother held his mother's tiara in her hands, her own face reflecting a mixture of defiance and the dawning realization that she had been caught in an act that would be impossible to explain away. The weight of the moment settled over all three of them like a suffocating blanket. And William's voice, when he finally found it, cut through the silence like a blade through silk. "What exactly is happening here?" William's voice carried the authority of his royal training, but underneath lay a tremor of barely controlled emotion. His blue eyes, so often described as gentle, now blazed with an intensity that made both women step back instinctively. Camilla, still clutching the tiara, seemed to search for words that might explain the inexplicable. The precious stones caught the afternoon light, sending rainbow patterns across the ornate wallpaper. A beautiful object now transformed into evidence of an unthinkable breach of trust. "William, darling," Camilla began, her voice attempting its usual smooth confidence but betraying a slight tremor. "I was simply helping Catherine with a small wardrobe adjustment. There seems to have been some confusion about appropriate jewelry for this afternoon's photographs." Catherine's sharp intake of breath was audible across the room. The audacity of Camilla's explanation, delivered with such practiced royal composure, only intensified the burning anger that was building in her chest. She had witnessed firsthand the political maneuvering that occurred within palace walls, but this felt different, more personal, more cruel. "Helping her?" William's voice rose slightly, his carefully maintained public demeanor beginning to crack. "By removing my mother's tiara from my wife's head without permission? On our anniversary?" The word "mother" hung in the air like an accusation, and Camilla visibly flinched. Throughout their marriage, Charles had worked to help William and Harry accept her presence in their lives. But moments like these revealed the fundamental tension that still existed. She was their father's wife, but she would never be their mother. And Diana's memory remained a powerful force that could surface at the most unexpected moments. "You don't understand the complexities involved," Camilla replied, her own composure beginning to fracture. "There are protocols, expectations from the king about how Diana's jewelry should be handled. I was trying to prevent an embarrassing situation." "The only embarrassing situation I see," Catherine interjected, her voice steady but filled with cold fury, "is a queen consort physically removing jewelry from another member of the royal family. Without permission, without warning, without any justification beyond your own personal comfort." William stepped further into the room, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. The soft click echoed like a gunshot, and all three of them understood that whatever happened next would remain private, at least for now. "Camilla," William said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "I want you to hand that tiara to Catherine immediately. And then, I want you to explain why you thought it was appropriate to touch my wife, to remove her jewelry, to humiliate her in what should have been a private moment before our anniversary celebration." The formality of his language, the cold distance in his tone, sent chills through both women. This was not the warm, sometimes awkward William that the family knew in private moments. This was the future king, and his authority was absolute. Camilla's hands tightened around the tiara, and for a moment it seemed she might refuse. Her eyes darted between William and Catherine, calculating, measuring the consequences of her next move. Years of royal training had taught her the importance of strategic retreats, but her pride made surrender difficult. "I was trying to protect the family," she said finally, her voice growing stronger as she found her footing in familiar territory. "Diana's memory is precious, and these pieces should be treated with appropriate reverence, not worn casually at every family gathering." The word "casually" struck Catherine like a physical blow. The idea that their 10th wedding anniversary, that this carefully planned celebration, could be dismissed as casual, showed a level of disrespect that went beyond mere protocol disagreements. "Our anniversary is casual?" Catherine asked, her voice rising for the first time. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of service to the crown, 10 years of carrying your family's reputation with dignity and grace, and you call this casual?" William moved to stand beside his wife, his presence a silent but powerful statement of allegiance. The gesture was not lost on Camilla, whose eyes narrowed slightly as she processed this shift in family dynamics. "Catherine," William said, his voice gentler now but still carrying steel underneath, "tell me exactly what happened here." Catherine took a breath, gathering her thoughts. She had learned over her years in the royal family that precision mattered, that every word would be analyzed and remembered. "I was adjusting the tiara you had asked me to wear for our anniversary photographs," she began, her voice clear and steady. Camilla entered and began discussing protocols about Diana's jewelry. She suggested I should choose something else, claiming the king had concerns about frequent public displays of Diana's pieces. William's jaw tightened visibly. Father never mentioned any such concerns to me. She claimed these concerns were being communicated through various channels, Catherine continued, and that as the king's wife, she was handling delicate family matters. When I refused to remove the tiara, she physically took it from my head. The room fell silent except for the distant sounds of palace life continuing outside their closed door. Staff members were preparing for the evening celebration, unaware that the central figures were locked in a confrontation that threatened to shatter carefully maintained family unity. "Camilla," William said, his voice carrying the weight of generations of royal authority. "You will return my mother's tiara to my wife immediately. You will apologize for your behavior, and you will never again presume to handle family jewelry decisions without consulting the relevant family members." For a moment, it seemed Camilla might comply. Her hands shifted slightly, and the tiara caught the light again, reminding all of them of the beauty and history at the center of this ugly moment. But then her expression hardened, and she took a step backward. "I am the queen consort," she said, her voice rising with indignation. "I am not some lady in waiting to be ordered about by anyone, including you, William. The king's wishes regarding Diana's jewelry are clear, even if they're not explicitly stated. Someone must maintain proper protocols." William's face flushed with anger, a rare display of emotion that spoke to the depth of his outrage. "You are my father's wife," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "But you are not the queen regnant. You do not make decisions about my mother's jewelry. You do not make decisions about my wife, and you certainly do not physically handle other members of this family like some sort of royal dresser." The insult hit its mark, and Camilla's composure finally cracked completely. "How dare you speak to me that way? I have devoted years to this family, years to supporting your father, years to trying to make peace with impossible circumstances. I will not be dismissed by someone who still thinks of me as the other woman." The words hung in the air like a curse, acknowledging the elephant that had lived in the room for decades. Catherine watched the exchange with growing horror, realizing that she was witnessing the breakdown of relationships that had taken years to build. "You are making this about yourself," William said, his voice filled with disgust, "when this should be about respecting my wife, respecting my mother's memory, and respecting the basic dignity that should exist between family members." Camilla clutched the tiara tighter, her knuckles white against the precious metal. "Your precious mother's memory," she spat, years of suppressed resentment finally erupting. "Do you know what it's like to live in the shadow of a saint? To know that no matter what you do, no matter how you serve, you'll always be measured against someone who's been elevated to myth?" Time. The cruelty of the moment was breathtaking. Catherine felt tears begin to form in her eyes, not from sadness but from pure anger, at the disrespect being shown to Diana's memory, to William's grief, to their marriage itself. "Give me the tiara, Camilla." William's voice was now completely controlled, emotionless, final. "Give it to me now, or I will call security to retrieve it." The threat hung between them like a sword. All three of them understood that involving palace security would mean the end of any hope for private resolution. The staff would talk, the press would eventually learn, and the scandal would consume them all. Camilla looked at the tiara in her hands, then at William's implacable face, then at Catherine's tear-bright eyes. For a moment, her expression softened, as if she was seeing the situation from outside, her own hurt and anger. But pride, that most dangerous of royal traits, won the day. "If you want this tiara so badly," Camilla said, her voice shaking with emotion, "then perhaps you should ask yourself why it matters so much. Perhaps you should consider whether you're honoring Diana's memory or simply using her jewelry as a weapon against me." The accusation struck the room like lightning. Catherine gasped, the unfairness of it stealing her breath, while William's face went completely white with fury. The suggestion that Catherine would manipulate Diana's memory for personal gain was so far beyond acceptable discourse that it left them all momentarily speechless. "That," William said, his voice barely audible but carrying more menace than any shout, "is unforgivable." Before anyone could react further, the drawing room door burst open again, and King Charles entered with his characteristic brisk energy, clearly expecting to find his family prepared for the anniversary celebration. His smile faded immediately as he took in the tableau before him. His son, rigid with anger, his daughter-in-law pale with shock, and his wife clutching a diamond tiara like some sort of bizarre hostage. "What in God's name is going on here?" Charles demanded, his trained eye immediately recognizing that this was far more than a simple disagreement about jewelry. The silence that followed was deafening. All three combatants seemed frozen, understanding that whatever Charles heard next would determine not just the outcome of this confrontation, but potentially the future relationships within the royal family. William was the first to speak, his voice carefully controlled but filled with barely suppressed rage. "Father, I arrived to find Camilla removing Diana's tiara from Catherine's head without permission or justification, claiming you had concerns about appropriate usage of mother's jewelry." Charles's eyes immediately shifted to his wife, and his expression grew grave. Throughout their marriage, he had worked tirelessly to integrate Camilla into the family structure, to help his sons accept her presence, to balance his love for her with respect for Diana's memory. This moment threatened to destroy years of careful progress. "Camilla?" he asked, his voice carrying a warning that everyone in the room understood. Camilla looked at her husband, then at the tiara in her hands, and seemed to realize for the first time the full magnitude of her actions. The righteous anger that had driven her behavior began to evaporate, replaced by the cold recognition of what she had done and whom she had hurt. There seemed to be some confusion about protocol," she began, but Charles raised his hand to stop her. "Did I ever express concerns about Catherine wearing Diana's jewelry?" he asked directly. The question hung in the air, demanding a truthful answer. Camilla's hesitation was answer enough, but Charles waited for her verbal response. "Not explicitly," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did I ask you to speak to Catherine about this matter?" Another pause. "No." "Did I give you any authority to make decisions about Diana's jewelry on behalf of this family?" The final question was delivered with the full weight of royal authority. Charles was not just her husband in this moment. He was the king, and she had overstepped boundaries that threatened the stability of the monarchy itself. "No," Camilla whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes as the full weight of her actions became clear. Charles extended his hand toward his wife. "Give me the tiara, Camilla." The command was gentle but absolute. Camilla looked at the precious object in her hands, then at Catherine's stricken face, then at William's cold fury. Slowly, as if the movement caused her physical pain, she placed the tiara in her husband's outstretched palm. Charles examined the piece briefly, ensuring it hadn't been damaged, then walked to Catherine and carefully placed it back on her head, adjusting it gently until it sat perfectly once again. "My dear," he said to Catherine, his voice filled with genuine remorse, "please accept my deepest apologies for what has occurred here today. This tiara belongs with you, and you should wear it with pride and joy, exactly as Diana would have wanted." Catherine's composure finally cracked, and tears began to flow down her cheeks. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she managed to say. Charles then turned to his son, placing a firm hand on William's shoulder. "I am deeply sorry that your anniversary celebration has been marred by this incident. This should have been a day of pure joy for you both." William nodded stiffly, but his anger was clearly far from resolved. "Father, this goes beyond jewelry. This was about respect, about family unity, about basic human decency." "You're absolutely right," Charles agreed. "And it will be addressed appropriately." He turned to face his wife, his expression grave. "Camilla, you will apologize to Catherine and William immediately. Then you will go to your rooms and remain there until we can discuss this matter privately." The public humiliation of the command was devastating for someone of Camilla's position, but she understood that she had brought it upon herself. With visible effort, she straightened her shoulders and faced Catherine directly. "Catherine, I owe you a sincere apology," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "My behavior was inexcusable. I allowed my own insecurities and frustrations to drive me to actions that were beneath the dignity of this family and deeply hurtful to you personally." Catherine studied Camilla's face, searching for genuine remorse. What she saw there was a complex mixture of shame, regret, and something that might have been relief that the truth was finally out in the open. "I accept your apology," Catherine said quietly. "But this cannot happen again. We are family, and we must treat each other with the respect that families deserve." Camilla then turned to William, whose expression remained stony. "William, I apologize for my behavior toward your wife, for disrespecting your mother's memory, and for creating pain on what should have been a day of celebration for your family." William's response was measured and cold. "Your apology is noted, Camilla. But trust, once broken, requires time and consistent behavior to rebuild." The formality of his language made clear that their relationship had suffered damage that might take years to repair, if indeed it ever could be fully mended. Charles's face showed the strain of the moment, the weight of trying to balance his roles as king, husband, and father. "Camilla, please go to your rooms now. We will speak privately later." As Camilla left the room, her exit seemed to drain the remaining tension from the air, leaving behind a family fractured, but not destroyed. Charles closed the door behind her and turned back to his son and daughter-in-law. "I want you both to know," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "that what happened here today was unacceptable and will never be permitted to happen again. Catherine, you are a cherished member of this family, and your dignity and happiness matter deeply to me." Catherine nodded, touching the tiara gently to ensure it was secure. "Thank you for your support, Your Majesty. It means everything." Charles then addressed William directly. "Son, I know this has been deeply painful for you. The disrespect shown to your mother's memory, to your wife, to your marriage itself, is something I will not tolerate. You have my word that measures will be taken to ensure this never happens again." William's anger was slowly giving way to exhaustion. "Father, I appreciate your intervention, but the damage to family relationships may be irreparable. How do we move forward from this?" It was a question that would require time and wisdom to answer fully. Charles considered his words carefully before responding. "We move forward by recommitting ourselves to the values that should guide this family: respect, dignity, love, and unity. We move forward by learning from this terrible moment and ensuring that it makes us stronger rather than weaker." The sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor reminded them that palace life continued outside their private drama. The anniversary celebration was still scheduled to proceed. Photographers were waiting, and the public expected to see a united royal family. "The photographers are ready," Charles noted. "Are you both prepared to continue with tonight's celebration?" Quote. Catherine and William exchanged glances, a wordless communication that spoke of their years together, their shared commitment to duty, and their love for each other that had survived this trial. "Yes," Catherine said, smoothing her hair and checking the tiara one final time. "We are ready." William took his wife's hand, squeezing it gently in a gesture of support and solidarity. "The show must go on," he said, managing a small smile for the first time since entering the room. As they prepared to leave for their anniversary photographs, Charles stopped them at the door. "I want you to know that tonight's celebration should be exactly what you planned it to be. Don't let what happened here diminish the joy of your anniversary. 10 years of marriage deserves to be celebrated properly." Catherine touched the tiara one final time, feeling its weight not as a burden but as a connection to the woman whose son she had married, whose legacy she had worked to honor throughout her time as a royal. "Diana would have wanted you to be happy," Charles added softly. "Both of you. That tiara belongs with you, Catherine, and it always will." As they left the blue drawing room together, the afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting the palace in golden light. The drama of the past hour had tested their family bonds in ways none of them could have anticipated, but it had also clarified loyalties and strengthened the relationships that mattered most. The anniversary photographs that evening would show a radiant couple, their love evident despite the trials of the day. Catherine's tiara sparkled brilliantly under the photographer's lights, a symbol not just of royal tradition but of resilience, dignity, and the enduring power of love to overcome even the most challenging family dynamics. In the months that followed, the royal family would work to rebuild the trust that had been damaged that afternoon. Some relationships would heal completely, Others would remain forever changed. But the lesson learned that day about respect, boundaries, and the importance of family unity would resonate through the halls of the palace for years to come. And Catherine would continue to wear Diana's tiara with pride, secure in the knowledge that it was exactly where it belonged.